Hi, I'm Dave the RPA guy, and in this Blue Prism tutorial, which is part 7 of our function series, we'll be going over the logic functions group in Blue Prism. That includes both the operators and the is functions. So let's start right into it. Our video is split up into two sections today. The second of which is pretty easy, the is functions. I got a piece of text, I think it's a date, let me determine if it's a date, things like that. Now the first section is going to be a little bit different. We're going to be using some examples of fruits and vegetables. So let me set up the scenario for you here. You go to the supermarket, pick up some apples and some oranges, some carrots, some cucumbers, and you have different numbers of these. Well, before you can walk out with those, there's guys standing at the door saying, now, did you get the proper number of vegetables, proper number of fruits today? Everybody's got to be eating right. So what we're doing today is we're going to look at the numbers of fruits and veggies that you're walking out with. You need to have a certain number of each in order to pass on and move on through the process flow. So let's zoom in and start talking about some apples and oranges. All right, so I know my example about the supermarket thing is a little bit silly, but it still is a good example. Think of whenever that guy is going to be determining whether you have gotten the proper number of fruits and veggies, he is trying to come to a reasonable or logical conclusion. He's going to look at what you've got and he's going to say, true, you've got what you need, or false, you don't have what you need. All of the logic functions have to do with coming to a true or false conclusion. So let's go glance over what we're looking at today. In the logic functions group here, and equals, false, greater than or equal to, and then a bunch of is functions. Is date time, is flag, is number, is time span, less than or equal to, not equal to, or, and true. All of these have an output of true or false or Boolean. Let's start off by using the greater than symbol to determine if there are more apples, which there are 5, than there are oranges, which there are 3. So let's look in this calculation stage that I've entitled more apples than oranges, and we'll look at the expression apples greater than oranges, and that will come out to a true or false. So let's step through and see that. Okay, we got more apples, true. Same thing is going to happen on this next calculation, except in this case we're comparing cucumbers to carrots, and specifically we want to know if there are fewer cucumbers than there are carrots. So we have cucumbers less than carrots. Let's step, and the answer we get is true because there are 6 cucumbers and 7 carrots. So that was greater than and less than. Next, let's take a look at equals and true. We're going to use this decision stage to effectively do the same thing we were doing before. We were trying to get a true or false answer, except in this case, rather than getting an output, we will go down one path or another. So what we're going to do is use this expression, more apples, which is referring to this data item right here with the value true in it, equals true. It is comparing the literal values of true to true. It will come out to true and go down the yes path here. There are a couple things I want to mention. First thing I'll mention is you have to use this literal value of true. You can't type quotation marks around it. While you might want to compare the text value of true to another text value, you can't take the data item here with the value true in it as a flag item and compare it to this text item. I'll go ahead and show you all. Set next stage and step. You'll see that we get false or no whenever we try to determine if this true equals this text true. Now I'm going to take these quotation marks out. The other thing I want to show you, the equals sign is very useful in Blue Prism. I don't want you to think that it's limited to just a few data types, so feel free to try it for yourself, but let me drag a data item on the page and just open up the data types. You see here we have date, date time, flag, number, password, text, time, time span, image, binary. The equal sign does in fact work to compare every single data item that you see here. So you don't have to decide to use one method or another, or one operator or another in order to compare these. Since we've talked about equals and true, let's now talk about their opposites, not equal to and false. What you have in here is this expression, less cucumbers, referring to this data item with a value true, is not equal to false. And since true does not equal false, we will go down the yes path because that's the question we're asking. Let me just go ahead and point out, if you're wondering, if you are new to Blue Prism, you may be confused by these operators here. Using the less than and greater than symbols next to each other effectively means not equal to. Why is that? I'm glad you asked. Imagine that you have data in here and you want to know if it's equal to this. Well, an easy way to determine that is to first decide, okay, is it less than or is it greater than this value? If either of those things turns out to be true, then that means these values are different. And so you can read it like this. Does this value not equal this value? Hope that helps you out there. And then of course, false is just like true, except it's opposite. So make sure you use it as a literal value and don't put quotation marks around it. Go ahead and step just to make sure that we do get true out of this. And I'll let you pause the video and think about that logic and ask yourself the question, less cucumbers not equal to false ends up having a true answer because true does not equal false. Let's move on. Next, let's look at and. What we're trying to do is understand what the and operator is doing. So we are doing two logical comparisons on either side of the and. Both of these have to come out to be true in order to satisfy the entire question being true. You have to both have the right number of cucumbers and carrots and have the right number of apples to oranges. We have 5 apples and 3 oranges, 6 cucumbers and 7 carrots. So let's see if we can guess true or false. Apples has to be more than oranges, so 5 apples and 3 oranges, and we have to have fewer cucumbers than carrots. There are 6 cucumbers and 7 carrots. So we should get true from this. Looks good. Let's just test it and verify that we did our logic correctly. If one of these is false, then the whole answer should be false. So let's change cucumbers to be 8. Now we have more cucumbers than carrots. So this should turn out to be false. So let's step. And look at that, we got no from that because one side was false. I'm going to change this value back to 6. Next, let's look at or, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. In this decision stage, the expression we have is apples, which is this data item, greater than or equal to 5, that has to be satisfied, or something else has to be satisfied. Carrots, referring to this data item, is less than or equal to 3. So if one of those two are true, then we will get a true answer for the overall question, which is different from and, where both sides had to be satisfied. So let's find out if one side or the other. Looks like there are 5 apples, so we should get true for this side. And even though this is going to be false because we do not have less than or equal to 3 carrots, instead we will still get true because of this side. Let's step, and we got the yes path. We went back and tested this to change apples to 4. So let's run the same decision stage again, and now we get no. There are not greater than or equal to 5 apples, and there are not less than or equal to 3 carrots. Both of them have to be false for the overall question to be false. Now it's time for us to look at the is functions, or what I'm calling here as the data type validators. There are 2 ways to validate a data type. The first way, whenever you are deciding whether or not you can take a piece of text and use it as, say, a date or a number, is you can try to cast it. You can take the data from the text and you can put it into a date data item. The other way to do it is by using a data type validator is function. So in this case, we have an is function of is date. And for each of these, it's going to be the same thing. So I may not point out each one individually, but it's going to say is date, is number, is time. And then you're giving it an input, which I'm pointing it to the inputs over here on the left. Is this a date? Let's step and find out. Yes, 2/13/2018 with those forward slashes is considered a date by Blue Prism and my regional settings. And then we're going to find out if this same date and then 3/49/23 in the afternoon, if that's considered a date time and can be casted to that data type, it can be. Now the next thing is going to be this flag input of yes. So yes or no comes out of these decision stages up here, right? So you might be tempted to use yes or no. Well, let's find out whether you can use that in addition to true and false values. Turns out that you cannot use yes as a data type of flag. The next thing is going to be is number. Now, in this case, what I have for my data over here is 35,000. In the United States, it's common for us to display numbers with a comma every 3 digits, indicating a thousands or millions or billions, etc. And so we're going to see if Blue Prism can determine that this is a number, even though we've given it a comma. Okay, so Blue Prism recognizes this as a number, and that probably just means that the way that Blue Prism was designed is to be able to handle that type of conversion. And then we've got is time. So I've put in a time here of 30, which is not a thing. There's not 30 hours in a day, though goodness gracious, I know we all wish there were. 30 hours, which would be 30 o'clock and 15 minutes in the afternoon, which doesn't make any sense, right? So let's see if that is a time, and we would expect that it is in fact not a time. So that'll do some validation for us there. And then the last one we have is a time span. So we have 40 days, 8 hours, 15 minutes, and 0 seconds. That should be a time span. Let's step forward, and it is in fact a time span. I know that last section was really quick. They're kind of self-explanatory, but I wanted to point out the purpose of them and also just kind of walk you through them. So you can use these whenever you want to determine whether a piece of data can be pulled out of text and put into another data item. You don't necessarily just have to try it and then catch the error. You can determine ahead of time whether it will work properly or not. Of course, after you did this, you'd probably want to use a decision stage to check whether or not that's true. And then you'd take the yes or no path and do some different things based upon that. One last thought I want to leave you with before we go to the closer of the video with the floaty buttons and the subscribe buttons and whatever else. When you are using these functions, I encourage you to make sure that how you're writing it out makes it readable. So you saw that one part we got really confused with the greater than, less than symbols next to each other and having false and stuff involved with it. Ask yourself the question when you are outside the decision stage like this, do we have more apples than oranges? That's a question people can answer. Don't have questions in your decision stages like, do we not have more apples than oranges? No, that's just confusing. Consider your questions, write them in a way that's logical, take the burden off of those who come after you to maintain your code. In this Blue Prism tutorial, we went over the logic functions in Blue Prism. I hope you found these to be helpful because it's going to be your everyday if you're a Blue Prism developer. You can't get away from these functions. I encourage you to try them now. Try them quick before you have to use them while you're sitting in front of a client.